Hello and welcome to Finance Conversations. This is the 52nd episode of the Merging Life and Money Show, and I am delighted to be here today. For those of you who do not know me, I am your host, Marie-Jo César. I help professional women bridge the gap between life and money by teaching them the relevant financial skills and knowledge they need to take control of their money, manage their finances, and understand that they can live their best life with the money they have. Thank you for joining in today. If you are watching the replay, make sure to type #replay in the chat and leave me some comments and questions. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. I come to you live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to share valuable information about how to achieve financial wellness and live your life with means and meaning. Today, my special guest Stewart Bruce will be talking about grant writing strategies for nonprofit. Okay, Stewart Bruce is a grant specialist. So far, he raised in excess of $10 million for a variety of nonprofit and government organizations. He offers strategic advice, coaching, grant review, and funding research services. His proven three-step strategy to find OPM, which stands for Other People Money, is a foundational base for everyone seeking other people money to support their own organizations. Welcome, Stewart, to the Merging Life and Money Show, and welcome, followers and listeners. Thank you for joining in today. So grab a pen and a notebook, as you might want to take some note to discuss them further with family members, friends, colleagues, whoever you want to, because it is about sharing values that could benefit others. So if you have any comment whatsoever, make sure to put them in the chat as well as questions, okay? So, and as you may know, the main objective of the Merging Life and Money Show and my very strong why is to empower as many women as I can with what I know about money and finance. As I mentioned a few moments ago, today's show is about grant writing for nonprofit organizations. And to give some context to today's show, I will note that nonprofit organizations can and do use several sources of income to help them fulfill their missions. They really rely substantially on fundraising, particularly through charity events. And as you know, with the advent of the pandemic, the remote world became the way, and nonprofit organizations had to deal with event cancellations and look more to private contributions and grants to remain afloat and achieve their missions. So we will be talking about the whole grant writing process, which is needed now, and focus on its main three components, which are having a great idea, finding a funding source, and writing the narrative. So basically, a grant is a way a government or an organization funds ideas and projects for specific causes or purpose. So, Stuart, tell us more about the great idea that one must have in order to apply for a grant.
Well, first off, let me say thank you very much for having me on your show this week for your 52nd episode. I've been doing this for over a year now, which is pretty exciting. So I'm very happy to be here today and happy to talk about grants, one of my favorite subjects. So in terms of what makes a great idea, there's really 6 components that I see. First off, your idea should be innovative. It's that you don't want to do the same old thing that everybody else is doing, but you want to have an innovative idea that sort of attracts the funder's attention that your idea has some merit. The idea doesn't necessarily have to be innovative and new just to you, okay? It's possible that you could find maybe a larger organization that you have some contact with, and you see that they're trying a new innovative idea, but this idea has not been tried in your city or your area. So not necessarily had to be absolutely innovative, never done before, but new to you and something that's going to attract the attention of funders. So innovation is always good. The second thing, and I can't stress this enough, is that any good idea has a lot of partners. So any nonprofit organization, you really can't live in this little bubble just by yourself. You should be creating a network in the community. You should be identifying partners for projects. And of course, the time to do that is not when you're applying for a grant, but to lay that groundwork down in advance so that you have these connections and possible partners. So when you see an opportunity and you have a great innovative idea, you can immediately connect with some partners, talk it over, and get them on board to your idea. The other important thing is for any nonprofit, any nonprofit would have a mission. So whatever your idea is, it actually has to address a real community need. So not some pie in the sky thing like, hey, I'd like to have new automobiles for our workers or something like that. But, how is that impacting the community and addressing your mission to provide services to your community? Now, the next thing that I always try to tell people is that, any idea that you have, really should have what I would call realistic and measurable objectives. So you might say like, hey, I'm going to end poverty in America. Okay. Now, see, that's a great thing, but it's really hard to measure. So typically a good idea would have a targeted focus on addressing a specific objective, something that you could measure, because the funder who might give you money wants to know if you've actually achieved your objectives and if you reduce the problem that you're trying to address. So you want to be realistic about what you're trying to do. The next thing is with any organization, and Mary Jo, I understand, a lot of the professional women that you may help, they may not be running a nonprofit, but they may be on the board of directors, or sort of advising the nonprofit. So if you're a member of a nonprofit, before you go chasing around money, you've got to make sure that you have organizational buy-in to your idea, that your board is behind you and you have their support. So you just can't go charging off without this sort of organizational buy-in. Now, if you're in a larger organization, that might be the administrator or the president of your organization. You got to get them on board, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that sign the grant application. And you can't really go to them at the last minute and go, hey, this great idea and the funding's due tomorrow. No, you got to lay that groundwork in advance for organizational buy-in. Now, the sixth is, and this is very important as well, it kind of ties in with the addressing a community need, but you've got to try to use client input to develop your idea. So the stakeholders that you're trying to serve, how did you consult with them to make sure that your idea is actually going to address stakeholder needs of your organization? So those are the 6 elements of a great idea.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. I'm just going to try and repeat them again. You talked about the idea has to be innovative, has to involve lots of partners, have to address a real community need, and has to be realistic and measurable. And of course, you have to have the organization buy-in. And last but not least, you have to have the client input as well. You have to use that to develop the idea. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Stewart. Now, tell us more about the next step, which I anticipate will be finding a funding source. So how should one go about it?
Well, first off, you've got to have a mindset of waking up in the morning and going, where's the money? It's you've always got to be looking for funding, so one of the things that I like to suggest to everybody is that you really got to have a strong networking community. So let's say that you're an organization like a social service organization, for example, providing some kind of service to stakeholders in your community. Maybe it's you're helping out mothers that are undergoing maternity, for example. Well, you should be networking with other similar organizations such as yours, typically larger ones, that have funding streams. Have a network with them so that when new grant sources pop up, new opportunities pop up, that you're looped into that network so that you're made aware of them. Of course, the worst thing that can happen is that a new grant opportunity appears, and because you're not really networked or paying attention to your market sector, you miss the grant entirely and don't even realize it until after the deadline's done. So networking is critical towards finding funding sources. Now, what I recommend to people is that, if you're really serious about trying to raise money, everybody's busy. It's very difficult, but I suggest that you carve out 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes a day and start searching. Like, let's say you're, whatever your cause is, you can go funding for what I do, and start developing some sort of search routines in Google. It's best to put them in a document so you can kind of run the same searches. But definitely, you've got to do some research. You've got to put some time in to trying to find available funding sources. Now, of course, the question is, who has that money, or as I like to call it, OPM, other people's money? Well, federal sources are pretty good. Typically, a federal source would require uh, a much larger effort to write the grant. I'll make a plug for my favorite grant of all time, which would be the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Distance Learning, and Telemedicine. That probably makes up about 4 or 5 million of the 10 million that I've raised over the last decade. State sources, whatever state that you're in, states will have various programs to sort of provide funding opportunities. Of course, you have private foundations. Private foundations are kind of a special category. Some of them have open opportunities, but a lot of times, a lot of the bigger foundations, you have to do a little bit of research so that if you're in this, like Mary Jo, you do the work with professional women, you're promoting the idea of networking. Some of you may have contacts that are on the board of a private foundation. So typically my experience with the larger private foundations is it doesn't hurt at all to have some contacts within the foundation, especially if they're on the board, that can give you some tips and advice and help secure private foundation funding. Of course, local businesses are always a great opportunity. Walmart every year, they give away money. Typically, most of the grocery stores do. But you want to sort of understand who the large industries are in your community and do some research on them and kind of figure out if any of them have their own sort of industrial foundation. Typically, the company foundations only will give money in communities where they're working. So if you have, say, a GM auto factory in your city, GM is probably a great source to go after some funding for your nonprofit. And then I won't put this one aside, but I'll say internal sources. So if you happen to be in a larger organization, often there's people's budget monies in a fiscal year that don't get spent. So being cognizant of the resources within your own organization might allow you to have an idea towards the end of the year that maybe somebody hasn't spent some money that they thought they were going to spend, that you can reach right in with your great innovative idea and then tap into that funding that you may already have. But you've got to kind of stand out from the rest of your organization to secure those funds. So some of the research tricks, basically I do a lot of web-based research. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I like the idea of sort of documenting search terms, putting them in a Word document so that way you can be kind of consistent in your Google searches. Using different search engines. If you go to Google, you get one result. You go to Yahoo, you'll get a different result. So use a couple different search engines to look around. And then bottom line is, wake up every morning and go, where's the money? It's just like, where's the money? And then networking again, I'll end on that. You want to let everybody and their brother and sister know that you're looking for money. Let your coworkers know, let your friends know, let your network know, because someone else may run across an opportunity. And if they know that you're looking for money to fund this great idea that you have, then they might let you know, like, hey, I heard of this grant opportunity. I know you're looking for money, but if you don't reach out and let people know that you're hungry, you need money, then you might miss those opportunities. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Stewart, for that. So what I retain, you said a lot of good stuff here, but the key point that I retain the networking, the power of networking, and of course the huge power behind research. So research, network. So thank you for that good information. Now to the third and last point for today's show, which is really putting it all together. Okay, you had your idea, you got your the way of to say that putting it together, finding the different sources, etc. So now you have to write the narrative, right? So talk to us about the best strategies to pen that great idea and all the relevant research that was conducted for that purpose.
Sure. So I guess I'd start off to say is that when you first come up with an idea, one of the things that you should do right away is you should write what that idea is. So I'm very fond of the concept of what's called a white paper. So a white paper would be a 2 to 3 page document, a very high level strategic overview. You'd have a paragraph or an introduction. You'd have a body that talks about your idea, and you talk a little bit about the budget that you need to do it. So you start off with that 2 to 3 page white paper, and then you can start sharing this idea within your network, within your organization, like, hey, this is my white paper concept for this idea. What do people think about that? And you can start getting input right away. So that 2 to 3 page white paper then forms the basic foundation block. When you actually have a funding opportunity to go after, you already have words on paper that talk about your idea. You've already got some input, and you're already starting to do editing. So really, for me, the key to good writing is rewriting. So you're going to kind of massage that. You're going to write it again. You're going to read it. You'll add some new thoughts to it. But you start to develop your idea way before you have the funding opportunity, although there is an exception to that, which I'll bring up at the end. So what I like to do is that when I have a great idea and I have a funding source, the first thing I do is I don't necessarily start writing immediately. So I would do what I call, I'm going to plan what is my strategy for writing. So, the first thing I look at immediately, of course, is what's the deadline of the grant. So if you find out, on a Tuesday that there's this great opportunity and the grant's due Friday, then you have to think and you go, can I whip this out in 3 or 4 days, this big grant narrative? Now, I'll tell you that normally you can't do that. I myself have actually done that. Find out about a grant on Tuesday and submit it on a Friday. Actually got a $500,000 grant that way. But I had all the legwork done in advance. I had my network, my community. I was able to call people and go, hey, I know it's Thursday night, but I need a letter of support by tonight. Can you help me out? And you can't really cold call people to do that. You've got to sort of tap into the network that you have. So the next reality check is, how many pages is it? Now, if you're applying, for example, for a federal HRSA grant, typically they're kind of daunting. You get this note that says, please limit your narrative to 50 single-spaced pages. Okay, so that's a lot of writing. And you may look at that grant like that and you may go, I just don't have the time to write a 50-page narrative. It's just too much for me. So you may abort, basically. And that's sort of the reality check. Now, when you're going after these larger grants, it might be helpful to have a team supporting you. Maybe have someone going down and get letters of support. But basically, doing it solo, you got a reality check. Can I actually get this done in time to submit a reasonable application for funding? Now, the next big part of strategy for me for writing is I always reread the application. So I'll print it out. I'll sit there and I'll pore over it line by line to make sure that I'm picking up all of the details that the funding agency might want. I then take that and I develop a checklist. Step one, I've got to do this. I've got to secure matching funds. I need letters of support. I have to write the narrative. So I have a checklist of all the things that I have to get. I may have to have special forms signed, for example, legal conditional agreements that have to be signed. In an organization, if you have a form that needs to be signed and maybe you need your CEO or president to sign it, you just can't go to them at the last minute and put some like 9-page legal federal form in front of them, ask them to sign it. They may want a lawyer to look at it or time to review it. So these are things you have to sort of plan for. And then, of course, you have the timeline. When's the deadline? This is how much time I have to work on it. This is when I need my partner letters in. I'm going to want to have other people review my narrative before I submit it. So you've got to make sure you have a timeline that allows for that kind of activity. Once you've got that done and you decided to commit to it, the first thing that I always do is I will do an outline of the grant. So I will look at the funding announcement. Typically what I'll do is I'll look for the different sections that they may want. Obviously, they want a narrative. They're going to want a budget. They want a timeline. All these different pieces. Each grant can be a little bit different, but I will do an outline. And I'll make sure that in my outline that I'm addressing every single one of the criteria that the funding agency wants you to respond to. Typically, what I will do if, let's say, the introduction is worth 5%, but the budget narrative is worth 40, I'll put those percentages in there. So let's say I have a 10-page limit, and I know what percent of the score for each section. If the budget narrative is 40% and I have 10 pages, well, I'm going to commit at least 4 pages to the budget narrative, right? So I'm going to try to make my response, the length of my response match the weight of each section that's on the application. And this can best be handled in an outline. Don't just sit there and start writing away. Have your outline. And then what I'll do is I'll take the outline and I'll basically use my outline and I'll start drafting my different pieces into it and just start writing. So that's basically, what I do. I'm not necessarily the world's best writer. Okay. I'm not on the New York Times top 10 bestseller list. But grant writing is a very particular kind of writing. It's what I call persuasive writing. So I will say that I always try to put things in a format that's easy for the reviewer to understand. So there's an old saying in writing, especially persuasive, basically a 3-step. You're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them that you told them, right? So you're basically hitting it in 3 spots. I tend to like to use bulleted lists, like, I'm going to address these 3 key components of the narrative. Bullet 1, bullet 2, bullet 3. And then I'll go through and I'll basically go into details on each of the 3 bullets. And at the end, I'll wrap it up in a summary and basically tell you what I've already told you 2 times before. But as a reviewer, and I'm actually I do federal grant reviews right now for the Department of Justice. And let me tell you, I got a stack of 15, heavy duty applications, and I'm reading through them. And as a reviewer, and I have a full-time job, right? So I'm doing this at nighttime or on the weekends. If I start reading your narrative and I can't understand what you're saying, then your score is going down, right?
Good, yeah.
It's going down, and it's make it easy and understandable for people to read. And then remember, writing is rewriting. Okay, so once you have your narrative done, you've got to have enough time in the timeline that you can share it with a few other people, get their comments. Sometimes when you get engrossed in writing, like, you just miss things because you've read it so many times that another set of eyes is always a good idea if you have time to do it. So,
well, here you have it. I mean, writing a grant is an art, and I would even say sometimes it's a science. So you have to account for all the percentages and the number of pages and all this and all that. It is not something that you decide to do today for tomorrow, clearly.
The other thing I'll tell you too is that this is something that I found is that if you're paying attention and you're doing research and you're networking, a lot of times a new grant opportunity will appear. Okay, so I found this most with state and federal. If you pay attention to the budgets of these bigger organizations, you might see like, hey, they have a new program they just authorized to do this, right? So this comes out in the new state budget, but it's so new that maybe everybody doesn't know about it, right? So this is where I come up with one of my favorite sayings: the early bird gets the worm, right? So if you catch a new opportunity showing up, the best time to apply is the first year, because by the second year, everybody and their brother is going to know about this, and they're all going to be applying for it. So I found this to be true.
Great advice. Great advice. I mean, thank you so much for all that you told us today. I mean, this is definitely a specific task. And I would tell people, if you plan on applying for a grant, you would want to know what to do. So in that case, you could head on to my YouTube channel and looked at episode 52, and where Stewart had it all explained there. So thanks again, Stewart. Lots of good information. And I am going to wind down some and sum it up. So today we talked about the grant writing process, and we focused on the three main component of that, which is having a great idea, finding a funding source, and of course, writing the narrative. So let me give you my last thought on this topic. So grants are an excellent source of funding, without a doubt. And statistics show that each year, foundations distribute approximately 50 billion with a B to nonprofit groups, okay? So the money is there. These grants are available for a wide variety of charitable organizations and initiatives. And they are a critical lifeline for many organizations, accounting for a sizable portion of any charitable organization's yearly revenue. So whilst, from what I heard a few moments ago, whilst grant writing is not a simple undertaking, it requires dedication, persistence, from what I could see, sometimes including several revisions and an attempt, right? As you mentioned, remember, writing is rewriting.
Yep. And Mary Jo,
yep,
somebody's going to get the money, so it might as well be you.
Yeah, totally. And as you mentioned, you need to do your research and compile accurate statistics and data in order to create an educated argument for your application. So additionally, you will need to carefully, I would say, consider which awards are a better fit for your organization. And you must make sure that you satisfy all eligibility requirements and that the grants limit aligns with your fundraising strategy, because it's a lot of work that gets into it. So you wouldn't want to get into this and realize that there is no alignment there. Okay? So this brings us to the end of today's Merging Life and Money episode. And before I forget, Stewart, tell the audience how they can contact you should they need or want to.
Yes, well, you have my email address right there.
Absolutely. I'm going to run it on the banner there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm really transitioning right now into, not so much that I would write grants for people, but I'd really like to, connect with some people that really want to maybe go through a training program, where I can put you into training, mentor you, help you write the first grant, and then launch you off on your own grant writing experience. But it is a lot of work, but I'd like to, try to mentor and coach people, assist you to be your own writer, be behind you, and then launch you off on a path of bringing a few million into your organization and do the things that you want to do that you just don't have the money,
Right.
So
Exactly. So thanks again. And I hope that you enjoyed today's show. And as you know, I like to end my show with a quote, and talking to you before the show and all this. So I decided, okay, I'm going to quote myself today. Okay. So grants can be an excellent source of funding for a good cause organization. Also, they can be a great way to get started and help you continue your work. So thank you, Stewart, for your awesome contribution to the show today. Okay? So for more information about how to achieve financial wellness from the inside out and live a purposeful life with the money you have, join me next week, Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Atlantic Time for my Bermuda Pips, and 10 a.m. Friday, Brisbane, Australia Time for my Australian friends. Thank you for being here today on the Merging Life and Money Show. I am your host, Marie-Jo César. I will be back again next week. Until then, continue merging life and money. Bye for now. So let me get to my banner here, and I could close the show. Thanks again, everybody.